Hello, everybody. What the flick? We are here talking about the third episode of American Gods called...
What? Oh, Head Full of Snow.
Head Full of Snow. I'm going to Bibbiani. This is Meredith Placko. Alonzo couldn't be here for this one. He will be back soon, I hope.
I know.
Someday. He really does want to talk about it. And this episode, there's a lot going on in this episode. And what I think is really weird about this episode is the structure of it is bizarre.
Yeah, it goes everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, and again, you know, I haven't read the book. I'm just, you know, only having seen the show. These little vignettes before the show actually starts with the different gods, is that kind of a way to like give you, the reader, like nods to these characters that won't, you know, do they make bigger appearances?
You know,
or
the one that we had in the beginning of this episode
with Anubis,
with Anubis and the woman dying and going off to meet the gods. I don't recall that from the book at all.
Okay.
Now the aside with the Ifrit later on in the episode, that is from the book. It's one of the more memorable bits from the book. But we're switching up because the first two episodes trained us to believe that these episodes are going to begin with a coming to America segment about how a different god came to America.
Well, this is how you leave America.
Kind of, yeah. Like, but now we're actually like doing segments that are already in America. What are gods actually doing now in this framework, in this current society? But we're not even limiting them to the beginning of the episode. The episode just stops.
Yeah.
And then we do the Ifrit segment, and then it goes back again.
Yeah, it was like a little vignette of a story that doesn't seem to, I mean, we do know that the Ifrit was something that Mr. Wednesday, he had contacted him in the previous episode.
Already.
So I'm assuming they're building to a larger thing with the Ifrit.
And everyone, really. They're all headed to Wisconsin.
Yeah,
there's
that's
a reason
true. Yeah,
for that.
so he's off to Wisconsin. So he had to give up his taxi driving to a gentleman who really just didn't want to sell cheap trinkets anymore.
That's interesting because if you read the book, there's no indication that the Ifrit gave up the taxi for any particular reason.
Really?
And now it does play like he's doing it to like forward momentum of the show.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a curse. You know, there's sometimes that whole like, you know, you set the genie free, but you take his place, and it's ultimately a curse. But for in this case, it really seemed for Salim that it worked for him. Like that's what he wanted, was an escape from his family and his daily life.
It's really interesting to see how American Gods is playing with the idea of America, and it's a sort of thing that I think maybe we consider it somewhat trite now, but they bring it up very directly. Mr. Wednesday has a bit about how kind of America is the only country with an identity crisis, where people actually will try to find the heart of America because, as we see in the show, America is kind of a hodgepodge of different ideas, different cultures, and they're all trying to like keep their relevance and try to find something new here.
That isn't even anything new. I mean, you think about America from the get-go, or especially from the 1800s. You know, you had all these different immigrants coming in, and people trying to, like, especially, you know, you think about the Irish, you think about, you know, cultures that want to stay ingrained but also become part of America. And like we, in like this post-1950s nuclear family idea, have the heart of America is middle America with, you know, the home, the white picket fence, the white family. But that's not America. That's definitely not my America. I grew up in Miami where, you know, everyone I encountered was from somewhere else, or at least their parents were, and they were born here. You
know, it's interesting. When I was young in like the 1980s, and my experience of the larger world was either based off of what I was learning at school or what I was watching on TV, it occurred to me that my concept of America was of that sort of suburban community breaking down constantly, either into some sort of subversive horror because of what I was watching on TV and all these crime stories, or from all of these kids movies that were about the family unit sort of imploding and kids finding escapism through meeting aliens or finding pirate treasure. And all of the liveliness was being brought to us from other places. Like I recently rewatched An American Tale, which is a classic story about the immigrant experience. They were anthropomorphic mice, but it's a classic movie, and it's about the idea of America and how people would think, oh, America is this land of opportunity. There are no cats in America, and the streets are filled with cheese. And that's not true. But there was an opportunity to make it that way. And one thing we're seeing in American Gods is these aren't just people immigrating to America. They are sort of the fundamental concept of their culture, the fundamental characters and gods of their culture. And what it says is basically the entire immigrant experience is people who are all powerful, all significant, all important. Every single immigrant has their own story, and that story is important in a very literalized fashion because they're gods.
Yeah, I mean the thing with the Ifrit was just, I mean, it was a little nose on the head, but it was also so well done. I mean, in terms of his immigrant experience.
Sure.
But I mean, we can't talk. Oh, go on.
No, you.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, I don't want to jump away from the immigrant conversation, but we can't talk about that scene without addressing, like, holy hell, that amazing homoerotic sexual scene. I've never seen anything like that on television. It was so authentic, so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I watch a lot of television, especially television aimed at the LGBTQ crowd, and seeing that was like, this normalizes gay sex.
I was watching the show and I was like, I couldn't tell you, even just mainstream cinema.
No.
TV, movies, how many times I've seen a heterosexual sex scene?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that in theory, but then it occurred to me, how many times have I seen a homosexual sex scene luxuriated over the way I've seen so many heterosexual sex scenes? It was great.
It was intimate, it was loving, it wasn't, you know, I mean, to see like the different positions and like, oh, you know, hey, guess what? They're just having sex. It's fine and beautiful and normal. And I was so blown away from that. And I had to stop and be like, because my boyfriend had stopped watching earlier on because he's gotten bored with the series. I was like, honey, you gotta come watch this, come watch this. And he's like, wow, that was really well done. And he's like, as you know, straight and narrow as they come. And he's like, that was really, really well done. I'm like, yeah, all right, go stars for, you know, getting that through.
And it is sensual and it is empowering in a way that I think is really, really important. You talked about how they're kind of hitting the nail on the head with a lot of this stuff, but at the same time, they don't overtly talk about the fact that these are characters who come from a culture in which homosexuality isn't even as free as it is in America right now. And even America, we have a long way to go. So this is a very rarefied experience for these individuals. And that has a weight to it. And sort of that smirking bit at the end, oh, you don't grant wishes.
Wishes, yeah. I know, but even just everything from like putting his hand on his,
oh, like, that was so
just,
great.
I know.
That was beautiful.
Oh, God, yeah. So that, I mean, if knowing now that that's such a big scene in the book, I'm so happy that they were able to make that come alive in the series, because you know, that surprised me, and I was just very, I'm like, I don't understand the significance of this other than this is significant for me watching this in this modern era, and I'm like, this is beautiful.
There's an article, God, I wish I could remember where it was. I want to say it was in Hollywood Reporter, but I could be wrong. I don't want to give credit to the wrong place. But there's an article that came out last night that was about that scene and about how Bryan Fuller made them reshoot that scene.
Oh,
because the people,
I read that too. Was it? God, it was either Variety or Hollywood.
It was one of the trades.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how when that scene, bless them, everyone kind of involved in the set that day was a heterosexual, and they didn't really know how the sex worked. So they had to reshoot it so that it seemed like people might actually have sex.
And Bryan Fuller had, and I can't remember the phrase, but he had a very in a very
the only way that position works is if his dick is like a candy cane. It doesn't work.
Boop, goes around the corner.
Don't need that. Meanwhile. We have Mr. Wednesday and we have Shadow, and they're robbing a bank.
One of the best cons I have seen, like A++. You know, we think Slippin' Jimmy is doing good cons over on Better Call Saul, but no. That whole bank, like, we're gonna rob a bank. Oh, that's how you're gonna rob a bank. That was so good.
It was pretty clever. I don't know if I would have fallen for that one, but like, you know, that's the whole thing is we need a blizzard. So that people just don't want to deal with it. They want to get in out of the cold. So they're gonna try to run as fast as they can.
Yeah, so now I'm confused because that was Mr. Wednesday telling Shadow. So Shadow, is he a god? Is he a demigod? Or did Mr. Wednesday actually make that happen, making Shadow think it? I'm so confused.
I don't want to ruin for you like exactly what may or may not be going on there. I have read the book, I do know some stuff. But what I will say is that this does play into the very fundamental concept of the series, in that the gods are essentially thought forms. They exist because people believe they exist. So theoretically, if we have the power to create a god, could we not also create a blizzard? And there may be more to it than that. I don't want to ruin anything, but I think even just on that level, I think it functions again as the show exists not in a literal sense. You know, Wednesday says, how great is it to live in a dream? Yeah,
and then, but even Ian McShane, Mr. Wednesday, goes on that whole thing about like the one thing that's the worst for him is to ever be forgotten.
Exactly. Because if you forget a god, they're not a god anymore. They're just some dude.
They're just some dude swinging a sledgehammer.
How did you feel about the resolution of that cliffhanger? You were big on it last week when Shadow was going to get his head caved in.
I'm glad he didn't. Like, I really like the scene he had with Varya
On the roof.
Yeah, the youngest sister. That was really nice, even though the CG was a little sloppy at sometimes.
A little bit. It had a fairy tale quality to it, though. It felt like a pop-up book.
Yeah, but on my TV, it just particularly looked like, oh. But I really liked her, you know, and then the whole like, you know, why do you keep giving your future away, and then giving him a silver dollar versus the gold coin? Really, really like thought that was nice. And then to go back then, and of course we cut to Matt Sweeney having the worst luck ever.
So it turns out that Shadow, the coin he got from Matt Sweeney was his lucky coin.
Why do you give away your lucky coin? Like how drunk are you, Matt Sweeney?
Quite drunk. He didn't wake up for several days.
That's true.
He was in the bathroom for like what? How did that happen?
I know.
So yeah. So and then we see in the cliffhanger that coin may have been really lucky.
And the fact that Laura is sitting on the bed in the motel, like, hey, what's up? How's it going? I was dead, but now I'm not.
This will be all important later. And it will actually. So how do we feel about this episode and in general?
I'm liking it more. You know, I've been enjoying the series. I will say it was there are a couple times where I'm like, you know, I kind of look down at my phone because it's getting a little ahead of me. and I like heady things. I love, you know, I actually almost minored in anthropological studies, and because I loved the idea of gods in different cultures. So I'm very fascinated by that aspect, but sometimes, like much like Neil Gaiman's writing, the story's getting away from what I feel it could be. But I liked this format.
I think this episode is a really interesting experiment in that format, because you couldn't do this on network TV. It would need more of a structure on network TV. Also, you'd have the ad breaks and everything. You couldn't build the sense of place and pacing that they have right now. This episode, with their intro, plot, complete aside that doesn't have anything directly to do with anything yet, going back to it, it plays kind of awkwardly in a weekly format. It's interesting. It's fascinating. I'm seeing all of these beautiful imageries and all this wonderful story, but it's strange, and I think it's probably going to play later when people binge it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of thing that a lot of television storytellers are having to figure out right now. How do you work serialized and
binging?
And it's something we've seen in all serialized formats have been struggling with this lately, also, comic books as well.
A lot of books that I read will have, like, especially, you know, you think about Game of Thrones, where it's every chapter is a different perspective. So in a lot of the sci-fi novels I'll read, if they're different perspectives, they just jump like that. So as a reader, I'm trained to you know, understand that, but as a viewer, it's a little destroying at first. But if I start thinking about it like a book, I actually really enjoy like the random asides. Quite a bit, like, because especially if I feel like, because for a little bit the whole Chernobog and Shadow scene was dragging a little too much for me, and I was like, oh, this is a nice little interlude, and it gets me ready to go dive back in. Yeah,
again, the show is creating a tapestry.
Yeah.
And I think it's, so far, and based on what I know of the book, it's one of the most interesting tapestries I've seen on TV since like The Wire.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very excited about it. But again, I think the issue with experimental storytelling like this is that the experiment won't always work.
No.
Now, that said, I don't think experiment failed here. I just think maybe this was an odd sort of attempt, and maybe it's okay to acknowledge its oddness.
Yeah, and I think, and I wonder though if every week they're going to experiment something a little bit different, or if they're going to go find their pacing, because that could be another thing that might throw a common viewer off, is if every episode is cut differently.
Yeah,
you
want to find your bearings. There's a reason people watch CSI every week. It's because they want the kind of the same thing over and over again. So it's not really catering to that audience.
Yeah, no.
But it's catering to us, and it's catering to you, because you watched this whole video. So thank you very much for doing that. And we'll be back next week with more American Gods.